Hey guys, welcome to PySQL. Today's section is part 2 of Python revision tour. Let's start today's section with the introduction to Python. Today, we are going to deal with overall Python basics tour. That is our 12th syllabus first chapter Python revision tour part 2. The contents included are tokens, Barebones of Python, and variables in assignment. Let's start with learning what is tokens. Tokens are the smallest individual unit in a program. Tokens are also known as lexical unit. Python has following tokens: keywords, identifiers or names, literals or values, operators, and punctuators. Now, let's move to a sample Python program to find out what tokens are. In this sample Python program, you can see for, in, and if are the examples of keywords. A1 is an identifier. 1, 10, and 0 is an example for literals. Modulus, double equality sign are the example of operators. Comma, colon are the example of punctuators. Keywords are predefined words with special meaning to the language compiler or interpreter. These are reserved for special purpose and must not be used as normal identifier names. Python programming language contains many keywords. For example, false, none, true, and, if, else, elif, def, import, try, or, etc. Now let's move to the second token, that is identifiers. Identifiers are also known as names. Identifiers are defined as the names given to different parts of the program. For example, variables, object, classes, functions, lists, dictionaries, etc. There are many naming rules for Python identifiers, which we can summarize as: number 1 is variable names must only be a known keyword word with no spaces in between. Number 2 is variable names must be made up of only letters, numbers, and underscore. Number 3 is variable names cannot begin with a number, although they can contain numbers. Now, let's move to literals. Literals are also known as values. Literals are data items that have a fixed or constant value. Python allows several kinds of literals. We can see 4 examples of literals. The first one is string literals. A string literal is a sequence of characters surrounded by quotes, where these quotes can be single, double, or triple. String literals can either be single line or multi-line strings. The main difference between single line strings and multi-line strings are that single line will terminate in one line, whereas in multi-line, the string spread across multiple lines. Now let's move to the second example or classification of literal, that is numeric literals. Numeric literals are all about the numerical values. Numeric literals are classified into 3. First one is int, second one is floating point literal or real literal floats, and the third one is complex number literals. In the first one, it is all about integers or ints that can be positive, negative, with no decimal point. They are classified into three: decimal form, octal form, and hexadecimal form. Here, decimal form is an integer beginning with digits 1 to 9. In octal form, the integer begins with 0 followed by letter O. And in hexadecimal form, an integer will begin with 0 followed by letter X. In the second type, that is floating point literals or real literal floats, it represents real numbers and are written with the decimal point dividing the integer and fractional parts. The third one is complex number literals. As we all know, it will be of the form a plus bj, where j is equal to root of -1, which is an imaginary number. The third classification of literal is Boolean literals. A Boolean literal in Python is used to represent one of the two Boolean values, that is true or false. And the last and the fourth of the literals are special literal none. Python has one special literal that is known as none. The none literal is used to indicate the absence of value. Now let's move to the fourth classification of tokens, that is operators. Operators are tokens that trigger some computation or action when applied to variables and other objects in an expression. The example of some operators are arithmetic operator, bitwise operators, shift operators, identity and membership operators, relational operators, logical operator, assignment operator, arithmetic assignment operator, etc. Now let's move to the last and the fifth classification of tokens, that is punctuators. Punctuators are symbols that are used in programming languages to organize sentence structures and indicate the rhythm and emphasis of expressions, statements, and the program structure. For example, the first line in the figure, that is a sample Python program, is given after a hash. That hash is an example of punctuator. And we already said colon, comma in this figure are the example of punctuators. So this was all about tokens. Now let's move to the next topic, that is Barebones of Python. A Python program may contain various elements such as expression, statements, comments, functions, blocks, or suites. Let's talk about the basic structure of a Python program using this. Expressions. These are any legal combination of symbols that represents a value. The next one is statements. They are simply the programming instructions. The third one is comments. They are also known as additional readable information, which is used to clarify the source code. These are mainly used by the users, that is, we people. Comments can be single-line comments that start with hash and multi-line comments that can be either triple quoted strings or multiple hash style comments. The fourth one is functions. Functions are the named code sections and can be reused by specifying their names for future purpose. They are also represented as function calls. The last and fifth is blocks or suites. This is a group of statements which are part of another statement or a function. All statements inside a block or suite are intended at the same level. Now, let's look at a figure which will give the brief description of Barebones of Python. Here you can see comments are the lines which begin with hash symbol. The second one is function, that is def cu function, print time to say goodbye. That is the example for function. In a is equal to 15, a is equal to 15 is an example of statements, whereas 15 alone is an example of expressions. Similarly, b is equal to a minus 10 is an example of statements, whereas a minus 10 alone is an example of expression. b greater than 5 is an example of expression. In if b greater than 5 colon, you can see a specific gap is given before the print value of a was more than 50 initially. That is referred to as indentation. That is the indented lines. And where indentation occurs, there forms or occurs blocks or seals. Indentation is very important, but if we do indentation unnecessarily, it will create an error. The last one is CU function, that is the function call. Here we can see that calling means it's a block, and last, calling above defined function CU. They are being written in the middle of a line, so they are referred to as inline comments. Inline comments are referred or defined as comment beginning in the middle of a line. This was all about Barebones of Python and its descriptions. Now let's move to the main and important topic, that is variables. Variables act as containers to store values. Variables are defined or identified by variable names. The values stored in the variable can be used further in the program. We can retrieve them by referring to variable names. For example, we can see if we just give or define a is equal to 10, the value 10 will be stored in a. If we just use print a, we will get an output that is 10. Assigning and how will we store a value to the variable? That is very interesting and exciting and very informative to know. Am I right? So let's see how to store the values in variable or how to assign values in the variable. Variable name, value, assignment operators are three things required to store value in a variable. For example, I am considering a variable that is my var is equal to 20. Here, my var is the variable name, 20 is the value, and equal to is the assignment operator. We can also store text, that is strings, in variable. It can be either in single or double quote. It can contain characters like letter, number, and even special characters. For example, we can see my var1 is equal to hey in double quotes, that is a string. My var2 is equal to hey in single quotes, that is a string. My var3 is equal to 2, that is a number. General syntax for storing a value in the variable, that is referred to as storing the variable, is variable name, that is variable underscore name is equal to variable underscore value. Underscore is not at all necessary, I just used that for the general purpose. This was all about storing and assigning. That's all for today's section. In case of any suggestions or doubts, you can just comment it in the comment box. Thank you guys. We will see in the next section with the continuation of this. That is the part 3 of Introduction to Python, Python Revision Tour. Till then, bye and have a nice day.